spit a 16 straight with no punch. Remember?
Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Norm Schriever, Real Estate and Mortgage Marketing with Norm podcast. Hope everyone's doing really well and staying busy. I wanted to bring to you today a fun guest, someone who's became a really good friend of mine, John Coleman. He's a mortgage broker extraordinaire in Dublin, Ireland. So we had a really fun conversation today. He was telling me how things work in Ireland in terms of the real estate and mortgage industry, way different than in the US, and a lot of other good fun facts about the market, homeownership, buying, and of course supplying mortgages to people in Ireland. So without further ado, here we have Sir John Coleman. Thanks so much for listening. Perfect. Today we have on the podcast an awesome special guest, a man I've been hunting down, trying to get on the podcast for a while because he's a superstar in his own right. John Coleman out of Dublin, Ireland. John, how are you today?
How are you, Norm? That's a great introduction there. You've been called a superstar. I don't know how to follow that, but yeah, it's lovely to talk to you again.
Yeah, you too. So tell us a little bit who you are and what you do and where you're at.
Well, I suppose for my sins, I've been a mortgage broker for over 16 years here in Dublin, Ireland. And God, I've seen all sorts of things, the financial crisis, where we're currently at right now, the good times when banks were throwing money at people. So, yeah, I have a very strong background in mortgages and helping people get their homes here in Dublin, Ireland, or in Ireland in general.
Great. And are you from Dublin originally?
Yeah, I've lived all my life. I spent a summer in London when I was 19 and came back, and for summers I've never ever moved out of Ireland. It's a great place to live. I really wouldn't want to live anywhere else. No offense.
Yeah, none taken. Yeah,
but I couldn't be happier living here in Ireland.
And I think a lot of people are going to want to move to Ireland when the dust settles, and we'll talk about that more too. But for people who don't know. Dublin is the main city, correct?
It is indeed. There's kind of four major cities here in Ireland. Now, Ireland is broken up into there's Ireland and there's Northern Ireland, and won't get too political here, but Northern Ireland belongs to Great Britain. Ireland, the 26 counties as we call it, there's four major cities. There will be Dublin, which is the capital. Cork, Galway, and Limerick will be the four kind of cities here in Ireland. And then there's obviously lots of places around Dublin and around Cork and around Galway that are very nice places to live in as well. But where I am from is the capital is Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah, and how big is Dublin? Like how many people? Just curious.
Oh, yeah, about over 1 million, maybe 1.25 million. Depends on the last census, and I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while since I saw that. It's definitely over about I think 1.2 million. I think is your base. Number of people that are living here in Dublin. I think it's about over 5.5 in Ireland in total.
That's pretty damn small. That's insanely small.
I won't take insult to that, Robert.
No, that's a good thing these days.
It doesn't feel small, but when you look at it versus other countries and other cities, it is small, but it certainly is a great place.
No, that's a good thing these days, believe me. And so today what we're going to talk a lot about on the podcast here is, of course, you're a mortgage lender there in Dublin, Ireland, and we're going to talk about the differences between real estate mortgage, buying a home, selling a home, between Ireland and maybe the US or Canada. And you've had plenty of people who are actually moving to Ireland from abroad, from the US, Canada, and other countries who you have helped. So you get to talk to people and you see the shock on their face or the confusion on their face. So we're going to highlight a couple of those differences. First off, who is it that you actually are helping over there with home loans a lot?
In the main, it would be your first-time buyer. So someone who's literally, whether they're from Ireland or from outside of Ireland, where they're living here and they want to buy, basically instead of renting, they want to buy their home. So that would be probably 80% of my business will be first-time buyers. You'd then made of people who are looking to invest in properties. You may be looking to refinance, but in the main, it would be literally first-time buyers, people who are looking to buy their home here in Dublin or in Ireland.
I know in the U.S., it's sort of like the American dream, quote unquote, is to buy a house, and that, there's all the statistics show that if home ownership is the easiest portal or the simplest portal to wealth, to building wealth, and having a higher net worth, a better quality of life, better educated kids who have a better quality of life. So it's home ownership has really been the standard of if you're doing well. And we have right now about 64% home ownership rates. What is it like in Ireland, and what are your home ownership rates?
Really good point. Home ownership here in Ireland is very aspirational as well, given our history with the British. Owning your own home is a very, very aspirational, very, very powerful feeling within the Irish race. We're even higher than that, by the way. We're close to 70% home ownership.
Wow.
It has been higher and it's been lower, but you're kind of looking at an average of about 70%. Based on the last census, again, like it is in every Irish family that the goal is, or the ambition is, to help the next of kin get their home. Generations is kind of the way it's been going, and people just want to have their own home.
That's great. 70% is really high. The U.S. at the highest point before the 2008 crash was at like 69%. And that's when they were giving loans to people who should not have had them. I mean, that was 100% financing, and you didn't need to verify any income, and no doc loans and stated.
Yeah, we had our own version of that happening as well. Like where there were certainly loans were being given out to people on a self-declaration from an accountant saying, yes, this guy can afford to repay the loan. So we had our own version of crazy lending going on back in the day as well. So, but yeah, it's still a very high percentage of people own their own home, and the demand, even in the current set of circumstances with the COVID going on, is still really, really strong. I haven't had any letdown in people wanting to talk to me around buying their own home, which surprised me slightly, but obviously I was pleased. I did think there might be a slight fall off, but no, people will still want to buy their own home, whether it be 6 months, 9 months down the road.
Yeah, they might have to.
Aspiration certainly won't be changing. In fact, it'll probably, given people are stuck in place, they're stuck at home, and the demand or desire to own your own home will probably only increase.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said to people, the whole concept of home is more valuable and important than ever now, right? But it's also, I think, a lot of, over here, at least in the U.S., a lot of younger people, millennials or just, 20s, 30s, they have a real hard time getting a home now just because it's expensive. Unfortunately, renting's expensive, and, buying a home, the prices have gone up for the last decade. So it's still, the best option for you, but trying to get your foot in the door and actually get your keys and owning your first home, a lot of young people have trouble.
Very, very similar experience here, Norm. And there was an election just recently where housing, before obviously the outbreak of coronavirus, where housing actually was pretty much the determination of the actual results. We didn't end up with a government on the back of it, but housing was the number one issue that, and lack of housing for people, that was basically came through loud and clear. So the next government who's about to form very soon will be, this will be their number one priority, will be to try to help more people get their own homes here. They obviously have to solve or deal with the current situation first. But as soon as that's taken care of, bang, we're all back to business. Housing is going to be the number one thing that'll be on the government's agenda here. Yeah,
and I think, of course the economy is getting hit just in wave after wave. It's like a heavyweight fight, and it's taken a punch to the stomach, a punch to the head, a hook to the, it's like one after another, But
that's a great description.
Yeah, and it's like just a flurry, and you're just like, all right, when can we catch our breath and, and start playing defense at least? But, with that being said, I think the housing market was very strong going into this crash, and it wasn't propped up by a bunch of bullshit like it was before the 2008 crash with these, no doc loans, stated income, negative amortization loans, and everyone buying houses just to treat them like ATM machines. It was 10 years of equity it accrued. So there's a lot of equity, and rates are low. So the point of this is, I don't think there'll be a huge wave of foreclosures and people trying to sell their house for pennies on the dollar here. What we're seeing is volume is way down, but the prices have only dipped, moderately.
Yeah, for here in Ireland, I'd have a very similar view to yourself. Currently, the impact is going to be more on activity. So houses being bought and sold. Those numbers are down purely because, well, no one can go in and see a house currently. But assuming that in the next month or two that changes and we're back and working in some form of new normality, as you'd call it, I would see a slight, this is my own personal view now, obviously I don't have a crystal ball, but my own personal view, there will be a slight market adjustment for sure because it's been a big economic impact. But the baseline of demand is still, here in Ireland, really, really strong.
Yeah.
And while a lot of people, there will be a certain number of people who will be impacted, unfortunately, may have lost a job, there's still going to be a higher portion of people who are still going to be working. So I would see the demand still being there, though people will be more cautious and maybe adopt a sort of a wait and see process. But there could also be then great opportunities for people whereby suddenly a house that they may not have been able to get at this moment may in the next 3 to 6 months become available for them. So there'll be people looking to be opportunistic, and then there'll be other people who will be looking to take a wait and see approach. But at some point, the wait and see approach will come. It'll be very much, we've got to get our own home. We've got to move on with our life. We're sick of waiting, basically. So I don't see the demand going anywhere on a sort of a short-term basis, on a sort of a medium-term basis. Short-term, it might take a bit of a hit, all right. But I don't see it. I see it rebounding pretty quickly. That's my own view. Obviously, I can't.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
Exactly.
I think it's not that everything is devalued. I think it's broken. So it's sort of like a conveyor belt, and all the goods are still on it, and there's still supply and demand, but the conveyor belt's broken, and so things are not getting through in terms of mortgage lending.
That's a brilliant, a brilliant description.
Yeah, and so
I'm going to rob your words because that's a much better way of putting it than I would. That's really. That is a really apt analogy there. And
the words will sound a lot better coming out of your mouth with your accent too. Believe me,
Okay. Well,
but so I think I definitely think that as things start getting fixed, or we have the new normal, or as there's the markets find their equilibrium, the conveyor belt will start moving again. And like you said, the demand is there. Here's the problem with people who are waiting, right? Always, I'm waiting for the interest rates to go down. No, I'm waiting for the prices to go down. No, I'm waiting for the perfect time. If you wait, you're late, because we very well could see where prices are at, 10, 15, 20-year lows. Interest rates are at all-time lows, but the requirements to actually get that loan and get that home may be more stringent than ever. So, for instance, in the U.S. now, a lot of lenders, a lot of banks are saying you need a 700 credit score and 20% down, or a lot of these low down payment programs are going away. So, 700 credit score, it's like less than, I think half the country probably has that. But then with down, so maybe the rates are great and the prices are low, but if you can't access them, then it does you absolutely no good.
Yeah, what they could potentially do here, which they had done in the last crash, was increased, as you write, to 20% down. Currently, it stands at 10% down. So the advice that I'm actually giving people currently now is get yourself approved while we're still working on criteria that are more favorable. That approval will last for 6 months and then be able to see if there's an opportunity that comes your way. Because you rightly point out, in a very short period of time, banks may take a different kind of more hardline view on their credit policies, and may make it more difficult for people to be approved. So that is the advice I'm actually currently giving to people.
Oh, that's interesting. So they could get approved with you now, and then that lasts for 6 months, and so they're almost sort of grandfathering in their approval, huh? Yeah,
it's certainly and obviously at the same time they still need to find a home that ticks all the boxes. But at least they're giving themselves the opportunity whereby if the banks within the next 2 to 3 months take a sort of a hard look at who they're going to lend to and sort of say, we'll only lend to people who have 20%. Suddenly that changes the whole range of opportunities that would be open to people. So it does make a lot of sense. I don't know, the system here is a little bit different, but I know the approvals here that would last for 6 months.
Yeah.
So it gives people a sort of an opportunity to
it gives them a window
to find a home. They don't need to have moved into a house within 6 months. They just need to have found a house within 6 months. So that gives the window even longer period of time.
I think the point is people are going to have to work a little harder to earn it. Like for here with the higher credit standards, even if you can get approved with a 620 credit score, if you take a couple months to invest in credit repair and fix up your credit a little and get above 700, you're going to see way better deals and way better pricing. And so what kind of credit score standards, or what's the whole credit score system over there?
Totally different to, we have a system whereby it's almost one strike and you're out. If you had loans in the past or a mortgage in the past or any kind of form of credit, where you've taken a car loan, an education loan, personal loan, and you have missed payments on it, they will turn it down straight off the bat. So it's not a case of a credit score. It's literally, have you got a perfect credit rating?
Whoa.
It's very severe. And sometimes it can take 5 years for your actual credit rating to be fully repaired. In some instances, they run 2 credit reports. One of these reports goes back 10 years. And the sins of the past can come back to haunt you.
Whoa, that is pretty crazy.
It's really, really severe. It's the first piece of advice I give every customer is get your credit checked. It's not a credit rating score as you have over there, but it's get your credit checked. Make sure that there's absolutely no issues. Now, for anyone that was potentially moving from the US or Canada over to Ireland, they wouldn't look for a credit check of sort, but they would look for there's a credit report via Experian. Now they'd be looking to see loans that you had, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any loans? Really, that's their first port of call. Do you have any loans back home? Because they don't want to be lending to people, or at least not, they want to factor in any loans that you might currently have back in the US. But if they did take a look at a credit report from the US and there was a whole number of missed payments on it, they could use that as an excuse to say no.
Wow.
So it's very tight.
That's interesting, and you guys are doing it right, because in the US, the American way is to run up a bunch of debt and then default on it and then rebuild and be ready for the next round. I mean, that's what corporations do, with these bailouts. That's what the government is doing. That's what consumers do. There's people that went through the financial crash, and you'd be shocked. They ran up $70,000 worth of credit card debt and loans. They had a massive house they couldn't afford, and they modified the payments, or they foreclosed, but they didn't make their payment for 18 months, 12 months, and they lived there. Auto loans, like everything. And then they just went bankrupt, or they just, let go of all this stuff. And in maybe 2, 3, 4 years, everything was rebuilt, and the banks were lending them money, and they were buying a home or cars again. It's like a revolving door. Yeah.
There's probably a reason, and I'll explain. There's a reason why that might be the case. Well, here in Ireland, it's much more difficult for a bank to get the home back off the individual because of as I said, the society wants to own our own homes. It's viewed as banks could be waiting up to 5 years before they get their home, they get the keys back off someone for defaulting on a loan, right? So, from the bank's point of view, they have to be really, really severe about who they're going to lend to. The profile of the customer, making sure they've demonstrated no credit issues, is really, really important. For that reason, it could take the banks years to get the person out of the house once they've taken ownership of it.
Are there it's a little bit off script, but are there a lot of scams out there? Meaning, like, people who try to, put up, they call them straw buyers, like fake buyers or different groups or organized crime or anyone that's sort of trying to hustle the system?
Not that I've heard of. Maybe I'm a naive, no, that's not something I've come across. I've heard of scams with renting markets and people who are trying to rent houses that don't even exist or don't belong to the person. I have heard those type of scams from the rental market, but buying a house, I can't see how it would work with the system that's here.
Interesting. Well, you guys are doing something right, because the scams also are just insane in the U.S. here. So let's talk about we talked a little about how you have some people coming from U.S. or Canada. Maybe they're coming to Ireland for work. Maybe they're of Irish descent, or their family was, or it's a retirement home.
There's two reasons that people come over here, right? To live. One is job opportunities, and there's some significant job opportunities. Or two is the love of an Irish woman or an Irish girl.
Yeah.
They'd be the reasons. And joking aside, the job opportunities will be the main one, obviously, because there's significant big American companies, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google have all got significant presences here in Ireland. So there's some really, really good job opportunities for people. So it's the country and the people and what we have to offer. Not being that big, as you mentioned earlier on, is a very big draw to this country for people to come and live here. With the education system here is really, really strong, and the countryside people are very friendly. So it's got a lot going for it. The one thing it doesn't have going for it, the weather. But that's something that's outside our control.
Why is it? Is it too hot and sunny all the time? Huh? You don't get enough rain.
That might be. Well, we wouldn't just go that far. It's mixed weather. It's a beautiful place to live. If we had 70 degrees or 22, I think you'd call it Fahrenheit, 22 or 23 degrees every day, then it would be perfect. But,
yeah.
We can't have that,
You guys get a ton of rain, huh?
We do get a fair bit, yeah. But that would be, so I wouldn't want to kid anyone who's thinking of coming over that the weather is perfect. It's not.
Yeah, well, some people don't mind that. Like it's the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle, Portland, Washington, stuff like that. Oregon, those areas get a lot of rain, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So, yeah, interesting. So I know that when we talk about people going back and forth, or people moving to Ireland, let's say from the U.S. or Canada, listeners may think that's just 1 or 2 a year. That's hardly any, but a drop in the bucket. But most people don't realize that 10.1% of the U.S. population claims Irish ancestry as of the 2017 census. So 10% of the U.S. is Irish ancestry. So that's a lot of people moving over to Ireland, or have parents that came over, or going back and forth.
Yeah, it's certainly there's someone, any American you'd ever meet does seem to be able to say, yeah, my friend's mother's. Yeah. There's always some time somewhere along the way to Ireland. It's incredible just to listen to the amount of people who claim Irish ancestry.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's all 100% legitimate, but I'm sure who might.
Well, we joke around here that on most days of the year, it's 10% of the population is Irish, and then on St. Patrick's Day, it's like 85%. Yeah, But I did read also that there's more than 500,000 non-Irish nationals living in Ireland. So basically, foreigners in a country of what you said, 6 million population.
Not even 6.
That's
so
a lot.
It's 10%. 10% of the population would be non-national, and would be not non-Irish.
Yeah,
the best way to describe it.
So when someone moves over there, let's say you have someone from the U.S. who calls you or emails and is looking about to buy a house and get a loan and inquire. When they start the process, what are they usually most surprised or confused about?
Well, there's a few things. First thing, not all banks will lend to them, right? Based on this is one thing that would shock them a little bit, based on their status, right? Some of the banks will be very particular about who they'd lend to based on, well, their view would be if someone came over here, there was a property crash, they could just hand the keys back and vanish out back home. So then the bank would be left with a property that was worth less than they'd lent on it. So that would be the first thing. So that not all banks will lend to them, but there are banks that will, and it's based on they're having the right work status in terms of their actual their visa. That will be the most important thing for them. So they might get, when they start talking to gold banks and they say no, we kind of go, are we not going to be able to buy a home here? And then someone might put them my way, and then I can say, well, actually, don't worry, you will be able to buy a home. You just won't have the choice of the whole market to lend to. You'll just have to work with the lenders who would be prepared to lend to you.
And that's your job, and what you do a good job at is searching between different banks and lenders and institutions to find them the best deal or find them the right fit, right?
Absolutely. There's two there's two parts of the process. One is to make sure that they have the money secured, right, which is part one. Then their job is to go and find a home that they're happy to see themselves living in. Then part two is then to make sure that it's still the best deal in the marketplace that's available to them. So there's a kind of a three stages. One, to make sure you can get the money. There's two, find a home. And then there's three, reconfirm that you still have the best deal out there. Because buying a home isn't something that happens overnight. You might get approval today. You might take 4 months to find a house, and then it might take another 3 months to close. So there's a lot of things can change in the meantime.
Yeah.
And my role is to manage the process. One, make sure you can buy a house, and then two, make sure you're getting the best deal at the back end.
And it takes that long? It could take up to 3 months to close the deal?
This is one of the things that shocks the Americans and the Canadians the most, right? It's the speed. Things apparently happen in the US a lot quicker than happen over here. It's a very long process. The thing that shocks them the most, Norm, would be there's no system of a realtor system as such whereby someone goes and finds you a home, right? That just doesn't exist here in Ireland. It's the thing that shocks the most. It's because in effect, the realtor only works for the person selling the house. So the people get treated as they're not the client.
Yeah.
The client doesn't belong. The client is the person who's selling the house from the realtor. So the person buying the home is almost just I wouldn't say a piece of meat, but it's very it's a transaction. There's no relationship involved with the person. Yeah. So it can become much more difficult in terms of how to bid on a property, how to secure a property, especially if it's secondhand. I obviously do like to bring added value to this process, whereby I will give advice to my clients on how to bid or how to go about that process without ever gambling with their money, because ultimately it's a home that they have to pay and they have to mortgage they have to take. But that particular part of the process really surprises people. Oh, I don't have someone that can go and find me a home. No, you basically have to do that search yourself and then go and visit all the different houses that are for sale with different agents. Right? And that's the bit that they don't get their head around and say, oh, it's not the same person who's bringing me. No, you could be dealing with 5 or 6 different. If you're looking at 5 or 6 different houses, you're potentially talking to 5 or 6 different agents who are only seeing you as one person. Yeah. But ultimately, the person who pays them is the person who's selling the house. So it's a completely different dynamic to the process.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then with the buyer, forget finding the house is hard enough, right? But when it comes to negotiating the terms, the contracts, they're just left by themselves. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's very scary for anyone, whether it's someone coming into this country or someone in this country. But bidding on a house is a daunting process. It's something you do once, maybe twice in your life. As a first-time buyer, you've never done it before. So, and then you're dealing with an agent who you don't know. You don't know if he's feeding you the correct information. So it is a daunting process, and one that's I'm sure there's an opportunity for someone to come in and shake things up a little bit here.
That's the first thing I thought about. Me and you should open up, John and Norm real estate agency.
We could then promote ourselves into the American community here. I'd say we'd get a fair bit of business going in truth, because and it wouldn't just be from the Americans, Canadians. There certainly would be a demand for that. I just don't know. My area of expertise is I don't want to pretend I'm an expert in each individual house, though I certainly will help people with regard to how they should handle the bidding process, because there's an art to that.
Wow. So your role is even more, even though it's not official, your role is really working with these people for, 6-8 months, a year, from start to finish in a lot of different capacities. So you really are working hard for your clients.
Yeah, well, that's what I enjoyed. At the very end, when they get the keys, and ultimately they feel like, in effect, I've taken the role of a little bit of the realtor for these people, whereby I've been the person who's been there to answer a lot of their questions. Because another thing they find very difficult here, our solicitors, are, I think I don't know what you might call them, the lawyers over there. Again, they have a totally different way of doing business with people than people might be expected. Their customer service is ordinary, shall we say, would be the best way to describe it, right?
Yeah.
And they don't believe in communicating with people unless there's some information. You could go 2 weeks without hearing from your lawyer. We call them solicitors, by the way.
Okay.
And it's a very frustrating part of the process. You're doing the biggest thing in your life, and you're getting no information back, even not getting any information to say, I have no information.
Yeah.
But the joy at the very end when they do get their keys and they feel that you've been a significant part in the process, it's very rewarding. But it is a journey, it has frustrations along the way because you're still dealing with banks and you're sometimes dealing with their red tape that's probably unnecessary some of the time, but they make the rules, so you have to play their game, and that my job is to manage the whole thing.
Wow, yeah, so that's your role is about 10 times bigger than what it is for the average lender in the US, I think. Our transactions, in the US, speed is everything, right? We're impatient. We have our customer service is too good for the most part, and we're very spoiled with a lot of things. So it's, a lot of home transactions, once they find the home and they put in an offer that gets accepted, they might go 30 days is standard or less. So you think about it, that's smoking fast in comparison.
Yeah, well, I would give you an average. You agreed to buy a house today. Today's the 15th of April. You could be looking at 3 months before you get keys. And that's with no legal hiccups.
Yeah.
That's a long time to have to wait when you just agreed to buy a house. That's for the second-hand market. If you're buying a new property, well, obviously that could even take longer depending on how long it takes to be built.
Is there a pretty robust new housing market or new construction there?
There is. It's certainly been growing. There's a scheme, a government scheme for the Help to Buy scheme, which is where the government will actually give 5% of the cost price up to 20,000 towards it. But it really wouldn't be of any value to someone coming into the country because it's based on the amount of tax you paid in the country in the last 4 years.
Okay.
So any people coming into the country, the advice would be, unless you really want a new house, would be to look at a second-hand property because there's an argument to be made that this Help to Buy scheme is already priced into the market. Yeah. As in it just helps people with the deposit. So that kind of, I would be recommending people who are coming in and don't really qualify for it, that second-hand is where you're going to get a better value for your book,
Interesting. And when people get a mortgage, I know it's going to be a range, but what are interest rates like, let's say today versus traditional? What kind of interest rate or what is
the interest rates are low, but they're not as low as Europe. The rates would be in the region of but somewhere between 2.3 to 3.5 would be the range, depending on, again, our offer rates could be slightly different to America as well. We could take a variable rate or you can take fixed rates, but the fixed rate's going to be for up to a maximum of 7 years. Maybe one bank might offer a 10-year. So the most of the rates are range between 3 to 5 to 7 year fixed are a variable rate. Again, they are the rates, lowest rate we are 2.5, 2.3, up to 3.5, 4. But they are they're higher than in Europe and probably higher than the US as well, based on, as what I mentioned earlier on, they're based on the fact that there's a risk. Well, we're going back to the financial crisis. The banks got themselves into trouble here and they're kind of still paying that back in effect, but more to do with, it's very difficult for a bank to get the house back if there's a problem. Yeah. So there's a risk premium attached to, because Ireland as a society doesn't want to be taking homes off people. So because of that, there's a slightly higher rate for the bank's charge to factor that greater risk in.
So when you talk about variable and fixed loans, which we call them variable or adjustable, and maybe they're fixed for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, and then they might even be interest only, but then they go fully amortized, but most of these loans are amortized over 30 years. That's what's pretty standard, where whether it's fixed rate for 30 years or whether it's fixed for a certain period, and then it goes variable, but it's spread out over 30 years. Do you guys have that kind of amortization?
Yeah, the term would be over whatever, depending on whatever age you are. You might be able to borrow up to the age of 66, 68, or in some instances 70. So that your age and your occupation would determine the maximum term that you could go to. The rates, if you're buying a home, interest only is not available, right? Mm-hmm. It was in the past, but when the back in financial 12 years ago, that was taken off the table and has never come back, and rightly so with regard to buying a home, in my view. So it's on an annuity or amortized basis from the get-go. Your choice, or the choice of the customer, really would be to decide, well, how do they view the market, the interest rate market? Do they think it'll go up? Do they think it'll go down? Do they want the flexibility to be able to overpay their mortgage, or do they want the security of knowing that for the next 3 years, no matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens to interest rates, that they're safe? So there's no, again, that conversation I will always have with customers, but again, there's no crystal ball here. It's a case of what, like, hindsight is great. You can always look back, I should have done this, but that's not really possible,
wow,
obviously. So it's a case of what, based on all the available information at any given point, what suits your own feelings and thoughts at that point.
That's interesting. How about paying off the home? Do a lot of people manage to, through their lifetime, pay off the home and maybe leave it to their heirs?
Well, yeah. Well, obviously the advice I would always give: the quicker you can pay your mortgage back, the less interest you've paid in total. There are people who would, at certain points, would refinance down the road, and they would reduce the term if their salaries have gone up and they can afford to pay more. Or if they've taken a variable rate and their lump sum comes in, they can make lump sum payments off the mortgage. So that, again, reducing the term. So yes, in the ideal world, you will ultimately have it paid off. But the maximum you can go to 68, in some cases 70 anyway. So at that point, the loan is the house is debt free, basically.
Huh. Okay, great. Yeah, I know in the U.S. that's the, home ownership is the standard, but back in the day, the formula was basically get a good job, buy a home, pay it off over 30 years, you're at the same company forever, and you have your home paid off in retirement. Unfortunately, that's totally fallen apart over the last 30 years or so. In Ireland, would you say owning a home is less expensive than renting?
Well, currently, right, it is. The rental market here, now, unless this changes based on current situation, but it can be more expensive to rent than pay your mortgage, which is it's kind of shocking. I have customers paying over €2,500 per month in rent. This is euros now, where their mortgage may only be 1,800. So, the concept of owning your own home, or it makes sense when you view just on a rental basis. But obviously, that's only one factor in it,
And I think it's about $1.10 is €1, so it's not that far off. Your prices or your currency is almost equivalent. So 2,500 euros is about 2,700 US dollars. So yeah, that's a pretty high price tag. What are the property prices like there? I know they're probably higher in the city where you're at.
Yeah, Dublin would be the most expensive. The prices in the last 12 months have pretty much stabilized. They hadn't really gone up, or they hadn't really gone down. They're kind of fluctuating in and around. Obviously, there might be an adjustment now, but really, you're looking at, like, Dublin would be the most expensive part of the country. Then you'd have Cork, then you'd have Galway, and then you'd probably have Limerick as the cities. And then on the outskirts of Dublin would also be pretty expensive. As I said earlier on, it's the biggest issue in the country was the price of properties. There's obviously a significant number of people who are homeless, but then there's also a significant number of people who want to get on the housing ladder, and at the moment are priced out of it. Now, in theory, once this epidemic or a pandemic has been sorted, and the government here is formed, their number one priority will be to try to help people get on the housing ladder. So here's hoping that they manage to help more and more people.
Wow, so there's a housing crisis, huh?
So that's really sorry.
So there's a bit of a housing crisis or something where you just don't have enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be called a housing crisis. Or probably more, crisis would be the wrong choice of words. I'd go with a housing shortage, where there's not enough people, there's not enough houses to supply the demand that was out there. And that demand isn't going anywhere. It just might be slightly reduced, but it's still really, really significant. So the biggest problem here at the moment in the housing market is the supply. The supply wasn't at the point where it was. So that's what was creating because the banks, in fairness, have been lending very, very, they've taken due care. Getting a loan now is a much more difficult process. They almost want to know what you're having for breakfast. The level of detail that they look, it's very, very forensic. If someone's gambling online, they'd say no. So like there's a whole heap of stuff that, no. There's a whole heap of things. So going back to the point, the crucial point is how difficult it is for a bank to get the house back now, that they are so forensic in the level of information they look at. Firstly, you need to prove to the bank that you can meet the repayments. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if your repayments are going to be $1,800, for example, per month, you would need to be either paying rent of $1,800 per month, or if you're paying rent of $1,000, you need to be saving another $800 per month, and they'd need to see that on a consistent basis over 6 months. That's the first kind of tick box to make sure that you can prove to the bank that you could actually meet your repayments. Yeah. So then they look at all sorts of transactions. If they don't like money coming in and coming out, if there's a lot of strange things going on with a bank account, they could use that as a reason to say no.
This is a little bit off the linear line of the conversation, but you were saying
wouldn't have it any other way, Norm.
Yeah, I know. When our minds start working, when they start churning overtime. But you mentioned that they check if you're doing some sort of gambling as a risk factor. They're gauging risk, which I totally understand. Do they actually start Googling people and looking at social media?
I wouldn't be surprised, but I haven't actually heard that yet. But it wouldn't shock me if that was the case. But I haven't heard it for sure. I don't think they're checking people's Facebook pages to see what Saturday night parties or stuff like that.
You laugh, but that happens in the U.S. I mean, not necessarily for applying for a home loan, and it's like, I didn't like your photo on Facebook, but it's all algorithms these days in the U.S. when you're talking about such a large pool of people. And for credit scoring, there's been talk about what kind of loans you take out, where you shop, where you spend your money, even what you like on social media. It's all encroaching and sort of starting to factor in. Yeah, it's very scary. So I was just wondering that. How about the investment market? Are there a lot of investors, like just people who buy 3-4 houses and rent them out?
Yeah, that would certainly, that was big back in 12 years ago, where that was probably one of the reasons that in Ireland where the crash came, was in people who were over leveraged in their borrowings. And it's the banks, like the mortgage market had kind of only really reformed itself properly 3 to 4 years ago. Up until then, it was still finding its feet after the crash, right? And it was only so it was only really reopening back up, and it's been more slow in getting into investment market. Not all the banks are very keen on that type of lending, right? So it's a much different beast, basically, in effect, and not as easy. They require 30% down rather than the 10% down. They'll be higher rates. They'll need proof that the rental yield is going to be there in the location. So it's a totally different field that would be
interesting. Interesting, yeah. And we talked a little about where you see the mortgage market and real estate market going in Ireland. And again, no one has a crystal ball. We're all just completely just guessing really at this point. But where do you see Ireland's economy going in the next year, 2, 5 years?
Well, taking, I suppose, the short term to start with, and the housing market per se, as I said, I do think there'll be a small adjustment, but I don't see any crash. The demand is still really, really strong. And obviously the housing market is a pretty strong indicator as to what's going to happen. So if that maintains a sort of an equilibrium of sorts, the confidence will come back into the market. There are going to be a portion of people who will be seriously affected by what's gone on.
Yeah.
But the Irish economy was in a very strong place before the outbreak. So I would see it coming back. It might take a little bit of time. There's still some really big companies here and some American companies that I mentioned earlier on that are, well, they're only growing. And they seem to view Ireland as a very strong base, I suppose, based on how close we are to Europe, based on the English language. So I can only see that growing, and I can only see the actual economy. But it's going to take a hit. It can't not take a hit.
Well, everyone is,
but I don't see it going into a tailspin.
Yeah.
That would be my view. And as I said,
well, in fact, it becomes just what you spoke to. It becomes more attractive to businesses who are looking to leave Silicon Valley in California because it's so expensive, or to go offshore with some of their operations or manufacturing or call centers. Like I live in the Philippines most of the year, as you know.
That's right.
And even though they're getting hammered with this, like everyone is economically, they're going to bounce back quickly because there's going to be 20% of U.S. companies say, we need to reduce our overhead and our costs. Let's move whatever we can overseas. And so, there's some value there. So I think
in all situations, and this is going to sound terrible, but there's always winners and losers. And obviously, this is a terrible situation, but there will be people who will be able to benefit from what's happening. Even if the market was to come from, I keep talking with regard to housing here. Even if the prices were to come down, there's going to be a position for people who will be able to take advantage of that, and will only be too willing to take advantage of that.
Interesting. Yeah, there's always opportunities. I told a client the other day that no matter what crisis or economic downturn, there's always an equal number of opportunities for people who are ready to scoop them up. It sounds like first-time buyers and people who are looking to get in the home market are going to benefit.
And that's the point I've been getting to people, as in, get yourself approved before the bank do change their criteria, and then be waiting for the right opportunity to come along if something moves in your favor.
Yeah, and I do see, like we talked about, you guys have 10% of foreigners in the country. That's huge, but I do see more and more people looking to either retire through all this. The cost of living is too high in the U.S., or they go for jobs. So do you see more and more expats or foreigners moving to Ireland over the next few years?
Interesting question. Like Dublin isn't the cheapest city. I do have people, like, from a rental point of view, can be viewed as expensive. But outside of Dublin, where there's so much space and it's beautiful countryside, and the people who are looking for that type of life, absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be a great place to live on a relatively cheap basis. Now, would it be as cheap as some other places to live in the world? Probably not, but it would have a lot of other things going for it that other countries wouldn't have. But outside of Dublin, you could come and live here in Ireland on a really, really economical basis and have a great life to boot.
It sounds amazing. Shoot, I want to move over.
But we'll have to get you over here someday.
Yeah. Hey, so I have obviously a big network, a lot of people listening here, of realtors, lenders, people in the U.S. in that capacity, financial planners, CPAs, all that fun stuff. If there's someone who's interested in moving to Ireland to get some more advice, or interested in buying a house there, or maybe a realtor wants to refer you clients and set up some sort of legit arrangement with referrals, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, I suppose the best way would be by email. My email address would be johnc@moneysafe.ie. And then we could set up a phone call at that point. I would get the odd person coming to me who's looking to go to the States, believe it or not. But it wouldn't be that many, but the odd time that does come. So I'd be more than happy to reciprocate any introductions.
Yeah, why not, right? I mean, it's every deal helps everyone. So, yeah, that's great. So people could email you, and then I wanted to. I've taken up a lot of your time, and this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. But I wanted to end with 3 fun questions, which I always end the podcast. All right, so get ready.
Get the drums rolling here, Norm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it true that most people in Ireland drink Guinness?
Ooh, which believe I never drank Guinness.
Really?
But I would probably be the only Irishman that has never drank Guinness. But yes, my best friend of 30 years, literally 3 weeks ago, I don't know what was going on in the world, decided he liked Guinness and he hadn't liked it for years. So it's certainly the it's the cliche. You think of Ireland, you think of a pint of Guinness, basically. So yes, there would be a significant percentage of Irish people.
But I mean, is it popular over there, or do people drink like Budweiser or something? Like, what's popular?
Yeah. No, it depends on the sort of age profile and the people I would imagine. Sorry, the people in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s. I wouldn't imagine to be that many of them would be Guinness drinkers. It's kind of probably anyone from 40 upwards would be where you'd have a higher percentage.
It's old school. Yeah,
okay, that would be my thinking.
Since we're doing ridiculous stereotypes because I'm so uninformed, what is one thing that people don't know about Ireland, or they might be shocked about normal life there?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think. We don't all drink Guinness. But
that's one thing. Yeah.
Probably that a lot of this is, again, I don't want to be too political here, but a lot of people. This wouldn't just be Americans, but a lot of people outside of Europe actually think Ireland is part of Great Britain.
Yeah.
And that is, sorry, I don't even get into any political
No, it's all good. It's all good.
But it is something that people would certainly, and yes, because North of Ireland does belong to Great Britain, but the Republic of Ireland doesn't. And that would be something that would be, that we would be at pains to emphasize.
People don't realize how crazy and bloody and how long that war, right? Between trying to get repatriation for Northern Ireland, right? I mean, that was some nasty stuff.
Yeah, no, and I'll give you a claim to fame story. There's Eamon de Valera, who's one of the founding fathers of Ireland, right? Was involved in the 1916 rebellion. Now, he asked my great-grandmother to marry him, but
really?
She turned him down. Yeah. Now, he would all the leaders of that rebellion in 1916 were all executed by the Great British, apart from Eamon de Valera, and the reason being he had an American passport.
Ah, look at that.
So there you go. But he asked my great-grandmother to marry him, and she turned him down for what? Thankfully, otherwise I wouldn't be here, Norm. But there's a fun fact for you.
So you have quite a lineage. What? So that's my instinct to call you sir was probably spot on, huh?
The superstar, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me, so what's the final? Or was that the final fun question?
We got one more, and this one is very serious. This one is. Put a lot of thought. This is a really, really good question that's very serious. So dig deep on this one. You ready?
Okay, I got ready.
Conor McGregor versus Rocky in a fight. Who wins?
Ooh, interesting. I, again, will be one of the archers don't have any time for Conor McGregor, by the way. So I would be hoping, I'd be shouting for Rocky every day of the week. Not sure who'd win, though, but Rocky would be getting my support.
Nice, man. Well, John Coleman, thank you so much. We had a blast, and I'm going to encourage everyone to get in touch with you.
Norm, as always, a pleasure talking to you, and we'll hook up again soon. And we'll get you to Ireland someday, and we'll let you taste a pint of Guinness, and you can make your own judgment on it.
You got it. Cheers, mate. Take care.
Cheers, Norm. All the best.